Welcome to the Fall to Grace podcast, a show dedicated to those who have stumbled, struggled, failed, and fallen, perhaps more than once. Our message offers encouragement, hope, and connection to turn your personal shame and suffering from a fall to grace. Thank you for joining us. We hope you will enjoy today's episode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fall to Grace podcast. I'm Kevin Kirkland, your host. Grateful to be here, grateful that you're all joining me, and I'm very grateful for this time of year, this season. Christmas is upon us. My last episode was sort of my Christmas episode because it's supposed to air today. This episode will air in a week or so, but as I look back on the previous couple of episodes, and especially the last episode, I was a little harsh in my self-judgment, and my producer reminded me that sometimes we are our harshest critic. So I need to maybe zoom out a little bit and gain a little bit different perspective. Interestingly enough, about perspective, the thought occurs to me that in order to see a rainbow, there have to be three things that are present: light, moisture, and you have to be in the right place. So it has to be a perfect triangulation of perspective and other events that are occurring at the same time. So sometimes it's just happenstance and lucky that we're in the right place. And sometimes we can be deliberate about that. But changing our perspective and maybe zooming out a little bit and being a little easier on ourselves is a good thing. It's not my natural way. I'm not good at it, but I'm working on that. I'm working on lots of things, as you know. And I'm finding some success, and I still fumble and stumble along the way. Charlie Chaplin famously said that life is a tragedy when seen in close-up and a comedy in long shot. So I don't want to lose my sense of humor, even though we're dealing with very serious topic of redemption, a fall, grace, repentance, turning from sin, correcting our mistakes. All of that. Those are serious topics. Those are difficult challenges. But if we change our perspective a little, if we zoom out a little from time to time, we can keep things more in perhaps an eternal perspective, and not be so hard on ourselves in the very moment. I want this episode, or not this episode. I want this podcast to be about not losing hope or our sense of humor in the face of adversity, but rather use those things as sources of strength and resilience, as I've talked about in previous episodes. Courage and strength and resilience are not easy to come by. There's a price to pay for those things, but well worth it. Excuse me. I needed to take a sip of water. For some reason, I have a little bit of a rough voice this morning. One of my, speaking of resilience and pressing on and moving forward, one of my favorite quotes, and some of you may have heard this or seen this quote before, but it's by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And for some reason, give me 1 second. I've lost it, and the Wi-Fi is a little slow. Excuse me for one moment. Here it is. F. Scott Fitzgerald said, "For what it's worth, it's never too late, or in my case, too early to be whoever you want to be. There's no time limit. Stop whenever you want. You can change or stay the same. There are no rules to this thing, to life. We can make the best or the worst of it, and I hope you make the best of it. And I hope you see things that startle you. I hope you feel things you've never felt before. I hope you meet people with a different point of view. I hope you live a life you're proud of. If you find that you're not, I hope you have the courage to start all over again." Now, I want to talk a little bit about that starting over again, and really this podcast is about starting over again. One of my favorite time of day is the morning. I start over again every single day. I contemplate and I'm serious about my life and the things that I'm trying to do. I take seriously my responsibilities, not perfectly, but I try to retain a sense of enthusiasm and energy and a sense of humor about everything, because personally, for me, that's the way I live my life, and that's the way I like to live my life, and that's the way I want to live my life. I get to choose. And so I'm choosing to take seriously the things that need to be taken seriously, and to remain lighthearted and happy, not happy-go-lucky. That's not my personality, but to stay enthusiastic and keep a smile on my face and in my heart and in my mind even. Stay positive. It's not easy to do those things. It's not easy to do that when you're facing real adversity or real challenges. So look, I'm saying things that I've already said and I've repeated a couple times, but I think you understand where I'm coming from and the point I'm trying to make. In today's episode, I want to talk a little bit about the painting that's over my left shoulder, the chair. I call it the chair. And that painting represents several things in life and in my personal experience, which I want to share with you. And some of the things I'm going to share with you this morning are very serious and emotional for me. And I know that there will be some emotionality. I will try to keep that in check, but let's face it, some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are very sensitive to me, and maybe for you as well. I know that I'm, in some ways, preaching to the choir in the sense that I know I'm not the only one that's ever sinned or fallen short or done terrible things. Maybe those of you that are listening haven't done anything like I've done, but each of us within the quiet chambers of our soul have battles that we're fighting, and they're not easy, regardless of what the battle might be. As we become more and more refined in our own souls, we even find more things that need to be perfected. Or we're reminded, as I have been regularly, that I still have work to do. And I'm grateful for those reminders. There's a Buddhist idea or concept teaching that if someone comes at you or comes to you and informing you of a shortcoming or a fault, instead of reacting with anger or with frustration, thank them, because they are teaching you. And I've recently had some of those experiences where I've had to pause for a moment, take a breath, and remind myself I'm still on this journey. I haven't arrived. I'm not the voice of warning. I'm not the sage. I haven't arrived at my destination. I'm still clearly on the journey, and I'm grateful for the reminders I get each day that I still have a long way to go, and that's okay. Okay, so to talk about a little bit about this painting that I call the chair. It's important to me, and I'm grateful to have this painting in my life. I want to tell you a little bit about that story of how I came in possession of it. I have mentioned it briefly in a previous episode, but my son-in-law, Brandon, is a very talented artist, and his sister, Emily, likewise, is a very talented artist. And she was opening up an art studio and had a show back in Iowa in her art studio, and it went live on Instagram, and it pinged my phone, and so I became aware of this moment, and so I was watching my son-in-law Brandon, who was back in Iowa, video recording this opening of her art studio, and she was showing a variety of works that she had completed. And on the wall, as I had mentioned in the previous episode, this painting caught my eye. And it immediately had an impact on me, and it struck me, almost dumbfounded me how emotional I got as I saw this painting, because it represented symbolically so many things that I was dealing with at the time. Not the least of which is loneliness and feeling alone and despair and so many other things, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit more. But I want to talk a little bit about Emily for a second. Emily, at a very young age, I think she was about 12, had fallen out of a tree and broken her back, and from that moment on, she's been confined to a wheelchair, thus the chair. There have been two things that, well, actually more than two, but there have been two or three things that continue to be a theme for her in her painting. I called her on the phone and we talked about, her feelings about her paintings. And one of the perspectives in her paintings that she repeated for a while was as if she was laying on her back, after having fallen out of the tree, and was looking up at the tree. And so she painted trees from that perspective, because that was a moment in her life that changed everything. And so that had very powerful and meaningful symbolism and emotion for her. And so in a similar fashion, when I saw this chair, it meant so much to me, and symbolically represented a lot of things that I was experiencing and a lot of things that I was feeling. And I want to talk about those things. Another reason why she painted a chair, or has painted chairs, she's painted more than one. My daughter Katie owns another painting of a chair that Emily did, is because she's been, limited to a wheelchair. She's been limited to sitting in a chair for all these years, and she's a full-grown woman with children of her own, a family of her own. And that has meant so much to her. So let me share a little bit about what the chair means to me. As you know, as a result of my sins and my choices, I lost everything. And when I say everything, I don't know what else I could have lost that I didn't lose, at least nothing that was meaningful to me. I lost my family. My marriage was gone. I lost my profession. The thing that I was good at and enjoyed doing. I was a good teacher, and I lost the ability to do that. I lost it as a profession. I can no longer be a professional teacher. I lost my place in my home, in my family, in my community, in my church, excommunicated from my church. Now, for those of you that may not know a little bit about the culture of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the LDS Church, most people call it the Mormon Church. When you lose your membership, for me, when I was excommunicated, it's not just, okay, I'm slapped with a title, excommunicant. In the Mormon Church or the LDS Church, there's no professional clergy. Everyone in the church has a calling or an assignment or a responsibility. Well, when you're excommunicated, you no longer occupy that chair. You no longer can hold that seat. There's no assignment given to you. You can't offer a public prayer. There are some sacred places in the LDS church and culture. There are sacred places and sacred times. Perhaps the most sacred place is the home, and the temple. There's a big difference between a temple and a chapel in Mormon culture. I can no longer enter at least for now, I can't enter the temple. But another place and time that's very sacred in Mormon culture is the Sabbath. And the most sacred thing that occurs at that moment on the Sabbath is for the members of the church to come together in what is called sacrament meeting. And in that meeting, obviously, members partake of the sacrament, which is the bread representing the body of Christ and the water, which represents the blood of Christ. Well, as an excommunicant, you cannot partake of the sacrament. So every Sunday, when I go to church, I can't participate like I would want to or that I normally could. And for years and years and years, I did. Now, that has a lot of meaning. When I go to church, I feel out of place. When I go to church, I feel like I don't have a place to sit. In other words, I can no longer sit, in a sense, at church. I have no place. I can no longer sit in the temple. I can no longer sit in my family circle. I no longer possess the role of father in that family circle. Boundaries have been set, which are justifiable and reasonable and understandable, and I totally accept those. In my community, I can't hold a typical job. If I go and try to find a job, I won't be able to get one. Can't pass the background check. In my attempts to find a partner in dating, after dating a little bit or going out with someone who I care about or have feelings towards, who I feel like this might be someone that I want to spend some time with, I have shared my story, and I'm still single. So the rejection rate has been very high. Not 100%, but close. Those are very uncomfortable moments to sit in. I have no chair, no place to sit. It's kind of like, life is a, game of musical chairs. The music stopped. I had no place to sit down. However, so as lonely as that chair appears, and as lonely and, in a sense, isolated and, in a sense, uncomfortable it is for me to sit in my life, that symbolization, as I've described it, is no longer 100% the way I see it now. Much like the rainbow, having to have the perspective, being in the right place, and the moisture and the light, I've changed my perspective a little, and the light has changed a little, and the environment has changed. And so I'm grateful for those things, because now this chair symbolizes something new. It symbolizes an open chair at new tables of friendship and associations. I've been very proactive in making friends and trying to foment and develop and maintain friendships that are brand new. I see that chair as a place for sitting for rest. Kind of like when you go shopping with your spouse or girlfriend or partner or whatever, and they're shopping and you're just looking around for a place to sit down. You guys will maybe relate more than women. But every once in a while, it's nice to find a place to sit down. That open chair, to me, symbolizes a place of rest and peace. Symbolically, it represents that place reserved for the welcome guest, the VIP guest, the special guest. The chair of life, the chair of the gospel, the chair of whatever good things that you hope for, is being reserved for you. And you will be invited. One of the things I have learned in my experience is, I'm going to relate it to pickleball because it's the one that makes the most sense maybe in the moment. As I've played more and more pickleball, I've wanted to get better, and the only way to get better is to play against better players. And so I was constantly inviting myself and being obnoxious about it because I wanted to play against better players. And, sometimes I would be shunned and sometimes I would be invited reluctantly. But then I found that I was inviting myself to play even with my friends. Please let me play with you. Can I play? Can I come? Are you guys playing? When can I come? I became sort of that obnoxious self-inviter. Well, interestingly enough, those chairs sometimes aren't open. Sometimes I'm not a member of the cool kids club, as I call it. And so I stopped inviting myself. And interestingly enough, when I stopped inviting myself, my phone got really, really quiet. Phone calls didn't come and texts didn't come. So I had to find my comfort. I had to find a new place to be comfortable, a new place to sit, and that is just play with whoever. And it's okay, because I don't play I play pickleball, or I participate in whatever it is that I'm talking about. It can relate to more things than just pickleball. I find that I'm going to do it because I have my reasons for doing it. For pickleball, for example, I play pickleball for the fun of it. I play pickleball for the exercise of it, and I play pickleball because it does allow me to make new friendships or associations. So I don't invite myself anymore. And maybe the invitation will come in the future, and maybe it won't, but I'm going to be okay with it. In the Jewish tradition, the open chair, there's a very, very beautiful tradition in the Jewish culture, and that is to leave an open seat for Elijah at the Passover. A chair is also used at the bris, where at the circumcision of newborn boys, there's this symbolic sitting of the child on the chair, representing new life replacing the old life, or replacing new replacing the old. So in that sense, if you look at the chair that way, the chair is open for me and for all of us as a special guest, if we will be patient and humble and wait for that invitation to come. Now, interestingly enough, the Savior teaches those principles in the 14th chapter of Luke. And I want to just read a little bit of this because it has direct correlation to what I'm talking about. In Luke 14, and it came to pass as he, speaking of the Savior, as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. They were keeping a close eye on what Jesus would do. And he goes on to say, it says, he put forth a parable to those which were bidden when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms. So, here's the Pharisees and the cool kids club members of the day, being bidden to a feast, and they would come and then they would choose out the chief room and the chief seat in the house. And Jesus says unto them, when thou art bidden of any man to a wedding, sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee, and him come and say to thee, give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto thee, friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. Sometimes we have to humbly wait, and that waiting may take some time. The chair is open, but I cannot necessarily occupy that seat that I would love to occupy until I'm bidden or invited to come. That open chair, as I have described earlier, that was one of shame and no longer welcome and no longer invited or no longer included. Those are real feelings that people often have, that I have had, that I've personally had. Very deep and sad and lonely moments where I know that and I feel that I don't belong. In the real world or in my regular everyday life, not being invited to sit at the chair is doable. I can live with that. At church, that's a whole different matter. It's a very difficult thing for me to go and occupy a place that I don't feel worthy to occupy. And I think a lot of people feel that way. They want to come. They may even already be there. But the feeling is of discomfort and shame and unworthiness. If this podcast is about anything, it's about making others feel welcome and loved because they need it and we need to express it. I no longer have, even though I'm emotional, and it's a very emotional and sensitive topic for me, I don't have the feelings about this symbolic open chair that I used to have. I believe that the chair now awaits me. I believe that I can be seated at the open chair at the table of the Lord. And as I look at that painting, when I first saw it, I kind of saw almost too much the shadows. And when you look at it now, or at least when I look at it now, there's hardly any shadows. But at first, that's what I saw. My perspective has changed. My ability to see with a different light, and my ability to see the colors of and the beautiful things that lay ahead that are in my future, and the open chairs and the invitations that have come and will come, because I know the Lord invites all of us to come. Come unto me, he says, and fear not. I'd like to close with two quotes from my brother Ronald that he shared with me. He wrote to me some time ago, "My rejoicing over my redemption must overrule my regrets for my rebellion." Now, I changed the word rebellion just so there would be a little bit of more alliteration. He used a slightly different word, but with the same meaning. I'd like to repeat that. My rejoicing over my redemption must overrule my regrets for my rebellion. And additionally, Ron wrote to me or shared with me a quote that says, "The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. The past is a place of learning, not a place of living." I hope for all of us that we can recognize that perhaps we don't occupy the same chairs as we used to, but there are chairs that are there for us that we will be invited to sit at, where we will once again enjoy associations that are sacred to us, places that are sacred for us, and moments where we can feel joy and connection and happiness and love, which is the greatest of all. Thank you for joining me today for today's episode of the Fall to Grace podcast, and I'll see you next time.